Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. So why do I have a skateboard on the bench when I'm usually working on guitars? Well, I'm going to try to turn this skateboard deck into a guitar. And I'm doing this because, I don't know, I just got a wild hair. I really like the 80s skateboard culture, and I just want to see if I can do something interesting for you all on the channel. And, you know, I've always wanted to try this. I've seen some skateboard guitars in the past. Different people have taken different strategies to do this. I'm going to see what my spin is going to be on it. I don't have a huge plan on it. I've done a little bit of a drawing, and I've got a neck from a Yamaha that is a actually really nice neck. And it doesn't have a standard neck pocket, so it doesn't really lend itself to a regular body. So why not make a body out of something cool? So that's the plan. You know, if you saw my little teaser on this, maybe you're excited about it. If you're just joining me for the first time, be sure to subscribe, and we'll follow along and try to do something cool. So you might be wondering where I'll even start. You know, I haven't actually worked with this material before. It's like a 7 or 8 layer plywood. It's about, oh, I don't know, we'll call it 3/8 of an inch thick. It's got this tail kick up to it, and it's got a sort of a concave, you know, side to side profile. The only things that are really flat about it are right here where the trucks mount, and then sort of a narrow strip all the way down in between the two, where the two truck mounts are. So I've got to try to keep most of my important components in that little area there. Like the bridge has to mount on a flat surface. I guess I could use a stop bar and tailpiece, but I'm going to try to use a sort of a hardtail Strat style bridge on this, and a flat humbucker ring to kind of go in this area here. And then my neck mount is going to be somewhere in the middle of this big logo. I've been doing some measurements. You know, a typical Strat body is probably in the neighborhood of like 18 inches long. I think this body, by the time I get done with it, is going to be probably closer to 20, because I'm going to try to keep a lot of this cool artwork here. And the neck I'm using is going to cut into this logo a little bit deeply, so I want to try to save some logo in some little horns or something, kind of a Strat style horn on the top. I'm gonna sacrifice this top piece a little bit to practice cutting, because I'm really not sure if it's going to chip out when I start using a jigsaw on it or what, but that jigsaw is probably the only way to get this done, and you know, it's a necessary thing. Better to mess up a little section that I've got to cut off than mess up the actual body when I start making the cuts for the, you know, the shaping, the contours that I plan to put in here. So the first thing I'm going to do is go back to my drawings, and I'm going to start taping up some things, sort of laying out some body lines with tape and seeing if the body shape that I drew on paper looks good in person. So the bridge I'm going to use is not actually here yet. I've ordered it on Amazon, and it's scheduled to arrive later this week. So what I've done in the interim, since Amazon was nice enough to provide me with a drawing schematic of the bridge, I've made a little cardboard cutout, and we're going to see where this thing needs to mount. I'm going to try to cover up the holes for the trucks with the bridge and the humbucker that I plan to mount. So I think these are going to land right in this area here. Now there is a little bit of a curvature underneath this humbucker, but I don't think it's going to pose much of a problem. This is a metal ring. It's nice and sturdy, and there's not a lot of slack to take up. I mean, it's just a hair underneath the edges. So the neck, you know, I've got to keep my scale in mind when I measure this up. I'm using a 25.5 inch scale neck, so it's similar to a Stratocaster, but I don't know, it's a Yamaha, and the heel is much deeper into the body because it's a 22 fret, and there's no overhang on the fretboard. It's just 22 fret all the way to the end of the neck. So it's going to land somewhere in this neighborhood here. And I just need to play around with it a little bit and make sure I get the length right. Well, everything is going to take a lot of measuring on this guitar. So far, I've drawn some center lines here. I've got a mark here where my bridge actually goes. I've got I set my neck on here and I made a template out of masking tape. So that's my neck heel location. And I've been working off some drawings that I made, and I've got a rough shape lined out in tape. All this just kind of gives me an idea of where I need to cut with a jigsaw, but of course a lot of this is going to get refined with some sanding after I get started. So, you know, things are looking pretty good. I've got plenty of board left for sacrificial parts or whatever. I may actually kind of cut it across like here just to get started, and then make some other cuts in here. I may use some of the actual spare pieces to sandwich up against the bottom of this and thicken this board up a little bit. I'm not really sure. My other plan is to cut a section of 2x6 or 2x8 and run it behind just to give this body a little bit more thickness where it's flat. And I'm really not sure exactly if that's going to work out or not. The bottom of this is curved, and that's going to make it hard to mate anything up to it. Well, I'm trying to solve the problem of there not being enough thickness in the middle of the board here. Basically what I'm doing here, I have taken some scrap wood that I've got. These are poplar planks, and the center one is an oak plank, and I've glued them together and clamped them, and I've got them ready to be the center of this body. And I've set up a jig here that is just wide enough so that these will drop right into it. So now what I've got to do is route a channel on this skateboard so that I've got a flat surface that I can actually drop these boards right into. So that's my next plan, is to kind of go in and flatten out a section. This will do two things for me. It'll not only give me a flat section that I can glue these boards to, but it also is going to give me an unpainted surface for the glue to adhere better to. So I'm not really sure how this is going to work. I might just ruin the whole thing right here. We'll have to see. Okay, well, here's how things stand. I actually did mess up the first routing attempt, and this one isn't a whole lot better, but it's better. So what I ended up having to do was, instead of going with a 3 3/4 inch wide strip here, I've gone with a 4 1/4 inch wide, and I've added a 1/4 inch to each side of my body block that I'm going to set down in this channel. And I've routed it out. It's pretty flat. It fits together pretty well. It's not perfect. There's probably some gaps that I'm going to have to fill in with some epoxy or super glue or something. But this is the template that I used to do the routing. The problem that I had when I did the first route was that I used a router template that was the width of this hole. Well, I was using a little trim router, and the trim router had a tendency to fall into the hole and gouge the piece underneath. So I had to make a template that was half as wide, or a little bit over half as wide as the hole, route one side, flip it around, route the other side, and that way kept everything pretty level. Not perfect. I've seen another trick where you can sort of build a frame that template drops into, and then flip the template around inside the frame, and that keeps things a little bit nicer. But I didn't do too bad with that, and I think in the end, this is all on the back, so who cares that much? I'll know it's kind of not perfect, but I think, you know, somebody who's picking up the guitar and messing with it will appreciate it for this side and not the other. So anyway, that's where things stand. Oh, and by the way, I now have the tuners that I'm going to use, which are a set of vintage kind of Clusen style tuners, and I actually have the bridge, which is just exactly the same size as that little cardboard template that I made, so that's handy. So next thing, I'm going to take a jigsaw and start cutting out some of this body shape. I'm not going to go crazy. I'm going to clean all that up with a sander later, but I need to get this basic arch at the top cut out, and then my neck will actually, well, the body blank that I'm using in the center here actually extends out to about here, and I'll have to route out a little bit of a neck platform, or like the place where the heel lands, whatever that's called, the tongue, I guess. So that'll be next. Okay, so I've done the gluing of the block back to the back of the board, and I've actually been at this quite a bit more than I planned to without filming it, but I obviously cut this board in half before I did the gluing, and then I've cut this basic body shape out. I just took a jigsaw and just came out, took out these sides, started roughing in these horns. They're not completely there yet, but that allows me to take off all my tape that I was using to mark up the body, and I can start to kind of see the guitar shape now, and I think it's going to turn out pretty good. And the weight is light, but I think because I have that full block on the back that's 1.5 inches thick, that's actually helping to give some mass to the back of the guitar, so it's not so nose heavy or headstock heavy, I guess would be another way to say that. But I think it's going to have a real nice look to it. I can't decide whether I want to try to incorporate this little hook shape into this bottom horn, but I think I'm going to leave it alone. It would help these things go together a little bit more aesthetically, but it doesn't look bad the way it is, so I think I'm going to keep it like this. I've got to figure out a way now to route the neck pocket and make sure that it's level. That's going to be tough for me because this surface, there's a lot of surfaces here that just don't quite play together nicely, so I'm hoping that this surface here is level enough that I can route this on the same plane and have everything play nicely. So that's one thing I've got to do. Now the other thing I've got to do on the back here, I'm planning to have some of my electronics back in this space back here. So what I'll do is I need to add some thickness back here so that it kind of covers up some of my wires. So I'm thinking about cutting off this nose and putting it back here on top of the tail. I may have to file it down or something to get it to look right, but just using this piece here as kind of a cover for some of that wiring that has to go back there. And I'm not sure if that'll cover all of it, but I'm going to give it a shot. So I'm going to get back to sanding and cutting, and I've really got to focus on that neck route next. So that's the next things I'll be doing. Well, I've got a lot of work ahead of me, so I think I'm going to make this a multi-part series, and I'm going to end the episode here today. I've got my neck template, my neck pocket template made up. I'll be doing some more routing in the next episode and just kind of putting some things together. I hope you follow along. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you want to see the rest of the series. I release an episode about every 3 days, or at least I try to. And, I appreciate the likes, I appreciate the comments, and like I said, please subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks a lot.